bucks if you'd like to donate a couple bucks for the pizza that week, and pop and the buff both. There's a bunch of miscellaneous expenses. If you wouldn't mind leaving a few dollars, we'd appreciate it from out of our own pockets. So.
Before I start, I just want to add on to one thing you said when you were talking about the federal budget over the past 12 years. If you look at the increases in budgets in just since the year 2000, our spending has gone up so much that we could have paid for 10 wars of terror almost, which means that 90% of the money we've been spending has been going to things other than the war. So if you think that's really, the cause of all this spending, it's really not. The real cause is just government waste. It's really awful. But anyway, I'm going to go ahead and talk about his foreign policy because that's one of the points he's stressing more heavily than any others. And I'll start by going a bit back in time. After 9/11, the Bush administration sent troops into Afghanistan to find Osama bin Laden. When the Taliban regime refused to turn over bin Laden, our troops went into Kabul and ousted the Taliban from the capital. We never found bin Laden. But we decided to move on anyway. The Bush administration sent troops into Iraq in March of 2003 because of supposed WMDs. The WMDs were never found because there never were any. However, we did succeed in taking down Saddam Hussein's regime and the rest of whatever Iraqi government there was. Now there's talk of invading Iran. Why? Boo. Because some people believe that Iran is actively seeking, you guessed it, WMDs. But pay careful attention to any neoconservatives' wording when they talk about this, because it's kind of funny. When referring to Iraq, they'll say WMDs, or weapons of mass destruction. When they're talking about Iran, they'll say nuclear weapons, because they're very careful to keep them separate. They don't want you to associate the two. They're using the same reasoning for invading Iran, and there's just about the same amount of evidence that Iran is seeking these technologies as there was for Iraq. Essentially none. But just think about it. We invaded Afghanistan, took out their government, moved on to Iraq, took out their government, and now the neocons want to move on to Iran. What do you really think is going on? Is this honestly about terrorism? There were no terrorists in Iraq before we invaded. Saddam Hussein hated terrorists. We never found Osama bin Laden. We got attacked once by a group of radical, angry attention seekers. Why didn't we just find bin Laden, then come home? There's just more at work here. And what's truly at work is a corrupt foreign policy. The neoconservative foreign policy is the one the Bush administration is currently employing. And I don't claim to know exactly what's their reasoning behind all this is, but all I can see is that we're going in, taking down these Islamist states in the Middle East, and we're replacing them with Western democracies. And their excuse for this is terrorism. What, like they're going to go out and destroy every single terrorist in the world? Here's some food for thought. Do you think that maybe our foreign policy of destroy everything Islamic might anger a few Muslims? By invading their holy land and killing their people, we're fueling the motivation for terrorism. I'm not by any means justifying the act of killing 3,000 American citizens, but what I am saying is the first step towards stopping this from happening is to understand why it was done in the first place. And simply put, it's because we don't leave them alone. Let me say this. The terrorists do not hate us because we're a free nation. Ron Paul has said this many times, and this is what the Bush administration and all the neoconservatives would have you believe. And it's simply a lie. It's their story to get you to help them to further their agenda by supporting their foreign policy. Don't listen to them. They may honestly believe their own lies at this point, but what it really is a bunch of unfounded, ridiculous claims that just happens to fit right in with their own goals. So what does Ron Paul think about this? What's his plan? Bring them all home. Bring our troops home from Iraq, Afghanistan, and wherever else they don't belong. Forget about Iran. Don't police the world. Listen to the advice of founding father Thomas Jefferson when he said, "Commerce with all nations, alliance with none." Keep our troops here, so we're not inciting anger in other countries, and we can defend ourselves on the home front. Ron Paul is, get this, an honest politician. Now, I know as Americans we're a little unfamiliar with the concept of an honest politician.
It's called a statesman.
There you go. But he's right there. He sticks to his beliefs. I don't support him because he's a little bit better than the rest, or because I like his views a little bit more. I support Dr. Paul because, as any person can see by watching any of the Republican debates, he's completely different. You really never see any candidates like this guy. There have been lots of politicians in the past who have had very solid voting records as congressmen, but when they run for president, they basically sell out. They're afraid to offend this group of people, or they have to appeal to this group of voters, and they just end up like all the other politicians. Ron Paul didn't sell out. He doesn't need to sell out because his momentum has started, and people like his message. People are starting to realize that they should go for the honest guy instead of the wish-washy guy who will sell out his core beliefs for a few more votes. See, when Ron Paul entered the race, very few people knew who he was. He wasn't popular, and most people just overlooked him because he wasn't a front runner. So when he got on the debate stage, he really had nothing to lose. So he just spoke the truth. He spoke from the heart, and he stuck to his beliefs. He ripped on the other Republican candidates for their unintelligent responses. And now that he has this momentum, everyone loves what he has to say. He can just keep ripping on all the other Republican candidates. But Ron Paul is simply the strongest supporter of the Constitution of all the candidates, period. When the president takes office, he takes an oath to uphold the Constitution. That's the most important thing, and Ron Paul does it best. He doesn't vote for any legislation unless it is explicitly authorized by the Constitution. The Constitution is the true law of the land, and Ron Paul is the only one left who respects that. Ron Paul has not once ever voted to raise taxes. He voted against the war in Iraq. He voted against the Patriot Act. He has an amazingly constitutional voting record during his 10-term tenure in Congress. He proposes numerous new, useful, constitutional legislations each year, more than a very large majority of congressmen currently serving. Ron Paul is bringing a message, and that message is freedom. He wants to return America to the Constitution. He wants to bring our troops home so they're not dying overseas. And he wants to get rid of income tax, which somebody will probably go over again. But leaving you with more money in your pocket each year. How am I doing on time? Okay. Ron Paul is the best hope for drastic change in this country. And I strongly encourage you, if you believe me, to go register as a Republican so you can vote for him in the primaries. That's the best way you can help us. And if you don't believe me, if you don't believe a word I've said, if you think you have more to learn, or if you just hate everything I've said, then go find out for yourself. I understand this is a pro-Ron Paul thing, so maybe you don't feel it's the best idea to take advice from us. So I strongly encourage you to find out for yourself, and you will see that the guy is completely different. He's the best candidate, he's constitutional, and he represents freedom.